Good evening, parents and carers, teaching staff, Old Foresters and Youth Advisory Board members. Hopefully more of us will be joining shortly, but I'm going to make a start. I am, and Forest, we are very excited to be launching our inaugural Forest Focus webinar series. Working together with parents and carers is vitally important to Forest, and we really want Forest Focus to ensure parents and carers can support their children at home by being informed and more confident to discuss relevant and sometimes very fast changing, as we know, topics. The programme will cover topics that encourage the personal development of our pupils as they progress through the senior school, which in turn we hope will truly support your child. These topics will be vast, and we do recognise that there is only so much we can cover. But we truly want Forest Focus to be on that journey, that onward journey with parents and carers as a continued discussion. Our aim is to publish a calendar for Forest Focus webinars well in advance, hopefully an academic year in advance. But in this inaugural year, we will be notifying you of upcoming sessions on a termly basis. So please do be patient with us. I want to thank those parents and carers that completed our initial survey so we can capture your thoughts and reflections on what you want to hear about, because that's vitally important to us as well as Forest staff members. This webinar this evening will be recorded and a link will be sent to you all in due course. Please do be kind enough to complete our feedback survey for each webinar, because we always want to know what we can improve on, and we want to hear your voices as you may want to hear further into these topics. We won't be able to cover everything in a year, but we truly hope this ongoing journey will be able to open up these discussions and dig deeper into these ever-changing topics, as I said previously. We're not expecting any technical difficulties, fingers crossed, but please do bear with us if we do encounter any problems. And we all know we've all come through COVID, and actually we've gone through that pandemic. So please do bear with us. Without further ado, I'd like to give a brief introduction to our distinguished speaker this evening. Deana Puccio, she said I have to use my fingers, co-founded the RAP project in 2012. She has vast experience in educating young people on the laws defining sexual assault and sexual harassment. After attending New York University, obtaining a master's degree at George Washington University and her doctorate degree from the City University of New York Law School, by the way, Deana doesn't stop. Deana worked as a senior assistant district attorney and was on the very, very first sex crimes special victims unit in the US, which launched in Brooklyn. Deana is the co-author of Sex, Likes and Social Media, Talking to Teens in the Digital Age, our topic this evening. And she does appear as an expert commentator on the likes of Sky News, the BBC, and is often invited to speak at educational conferences, to corporate clients and also festivals. She lives in North London with her husband and 3 daughters, and the RAP project did recently speak to our year 10 and 11 pupils. I'm very, very excited to be able to introduce Deana to you this evening. As I said, she has vast experience and she truly is able to articulate this vast subject, and actually, even for us as staff, make us feel that we can actually make a difference and that we can actually continue this conversation to best support the young people in our care. Good evening, Deana.
Good evening, Mrs. Milton. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much once again for taking time out of your busy schedule and life, as we've just heard, to speak to the parents and carers of the Forest community. We really appreciate it.
Well, I'm honored to be asked to speak to the parents and carers of the Forest community. We've been working at Forest School for quite a few years. And I have to say, it has always been a pleasure working with the students there and the staff. And it's a great opportunity that now I can speak to the parents and carers, because I think the great thing about the RAP project is that we get to speak to your kids. And because we're not their teachers and their parents, they feed back to us information that we then can feed back to you as parents and as carers. Sometimes we are the bearer of bad news. Don't shoot the messenger. But I think it's really important that we have these very, very frank discussions, because let's face it, the world is not an easy place. And I always say to the kids, I would not want to be their age for all the money in the world. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and let's face it, it was a lot easier when we were growing up. The pressure our young people have on them to be perfect, whether it's academically, whether it's physically, having come through lockdown, the mental health issues that this generation has been dealing with more than any other generation before them, dealing with things like social media, constantly feeling the need to log on, being faced with pornography, sexting. There is so much going on in their world. Now, when I started the RAP project in 2012, part of it was based because I had been a former sex crimes prosecutor back in New York. So many of the victims that I worked with were young, and many of the perpetrators that I prosecuted were young. Many of them made a decision at a point in their lives which seemed perfectly innocent. I submit was perfectly innocent, but changed the course of their future, and not for the better. So I always thought about, well, how can I make a difference? How can we speak to young people about prevention? And that was in the back of my mind. But then I woke up one day and I realized that I had a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old. You know, there's that moment as a parent when you look next to you and the baby you raised all of a sudden is a young adult. And I had this moment with my eldest daughter, Emily, when she was 15. And now she's 25, and the other one's 22, and the baby is 19. And I was driving Emily to a drama school on a Saturday morning, and her BFFs were in the back seat, two of them, the three of them in the back seat together. A lot of laughter was going on. And I'm eavesdropping on the conversation, trying to be the cool mom in the car, Capital Radio on in the background, probably then had like Pitbull or Flow Rider on. And I'm trying to get information and listen to what's going on with my daughter. And what emerges from this laughter is that my daughter was meeting up with some boy after drama school. So I'm a little surprised by this for a number of reasons. She goes to a single sex school. I've never heard her mention boys' names in the house. There's no brothers. They don't have any friends. Like, there's only my husband. So I'm trying to be cool. And I'm like, so honey, Emily, you're meeting up with some boy? And I get, 15-year-old eye rolling attitude. Yeah. Like, okay, does this boy have a name? Again, eye rolling attitude. John. Take a deep breath, Mom. I'm like, okay, so can I have some more information about John? What school does he go to? Where does he live? How old is he? A criminal background check? Can you give me some more information? Again, a lot more attitude, eye rolling. She gets out of the car, but before she does, she tells me that I've embarrassed her in front of her friends. I've ruined her life, and she was never going to speak to me again. Now, I'm not sure if that kind of conversation sounds familiar to anyone out there. And I also know I was going to get the most information in that car ride, right? Because as a parent and a carer, the best time to get information from these kids is in a moving vehicle. One, because they're not looking us in the eye. And two, they can't escape the conversation, right? Unless it's so bad they jump out of a shop at a stop sign. So far, that hasn't happened. But as my baby left the car and was going to drama school, I panicked. And all the cases I prosecuted back in Brooklyn came flashing back. It was like a movie set. And I thought, I haven't had a lot of conversations with her that I should have had. All of a sudden, she's grown up, right? I never spoke to her properly about sex or consent. I never asked her if she ever saw pornography. I never asked her if she ever sent or received a sexual photo. I had no idea who she was meeting up with, and I couldn't understand how I was so out of touch with my kid. I realized one thing at that moment, that because of social media and the internet, I had no idea who my daughter was friending, right? Mm. Because remember the days we were growing up when there was one landline in the house and connected to a wall.
Dial-up internet, that's what I remember.
Right? Remember those days? And when the phone rang, my parents jumped for that phone. There was always someone important calling, more important than my friends. The Pope, the Prime Minister, I don't know, but someone. And they pick up the phone and they knew who was on the other end. My world was small, right? People I went to school with, people that my religious community on my street. But what I realized at that moment was that because of social media and the internet, I had no idea who my daughter was friending.
Mm.
And what worried me more was neither did she. And then I realized that those conversations that I never had to her and I regretted need to be had. And I
Yeah.
think at that moment, what I also realized was that as a parent, I live in hyper anxiety about my kids all the time. I worry about everything. And all of a sudden, thinking of that baby of mine becoming a sexual being completely freaked me out. I was spinning out of control. It was that moment that I realized that we had to have these conversations. I was hoping they were happening in school. At the time, 2012, they weren't.
Mm.
And that's how the RAP project started. And that was over 285 schools ago and over probably 100,000 teenagers ago. So
And
we're going to
yeah.
we talk about young people understanding the laws about rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment. We also look at rape culture, toxic masculinity, understanding how negative gender stereotypes are affecting our young people and their relationships. We want them to question what they are seeing, how they're being manipulated, understanding what the law is. Not blaming them, not blaming anyone, not blaming young men, not blaming us as a society and us as adults for creating this world that our kids are having to cope in, which is not a great place to be at the moment. So going back, okay, to something that really hit me as a former sex crimes prosecutor and working in education and understanding rape culture and victim blaming. And I'm going to go back to March of 2021. We were coming out of, I don't know what lockdown it was, number was. And there was the report on the news about this horrible murder of a young woman named Sarah Everhart. And the anger, the sympathy, the empathy, the vigils that were taking place in London over Sarah's death, I had never seen before. And I was trying to figure out what made Sarah different. Now, 100%, she deserved our outpouring of our emotions, our anger, our sympathy, our empathy. But what made Sarah different? Now, let's be honest, tick boxes for the press. Young, white, attractive. The press liked that. But there was still something else going on. And after thinking about this, it hit me. You see, Sarah, in our eyes, even before we knew the circumstances surrounding what happened to her, that it was a police officer who was off duty, who used his power to do those horrific things to this poor woman. Even before we knew that, something was different. And it hit me. You see, Sarah was walking home from a friend's house at 9:30 in the evening. She was not inappropriately dressed, as society deems it. She was in trackies like we all were at that time, right? She wasn't stumbling out of a club at 2 o'clock in the morning, having gotten off with someone. Because we couldn't blame Sarah for what happened to her, we embraced her. That's a problem. A few months later, Sabina Nesser, again, young primary school teacher, walking through a park to meet a friend for dinner, not inappropriately dressed, not stumbling out of a club at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because we couldn't blame Sabina for what happened to her, we embraced her as well. When Sabina's murderer was sentenced by the judge about 2 months ago, the judge even said in his sentencing, she was the most blameless of victims. There is a woman murdered in this country every 3 days by a man she knows. Are they to blame? We need, as a society, to examine how we look at victims. The weekend of Sarah's murder being reported, I was driving my daughter. All my daughters have gone to London independent day schools. I was driving my youngest daughter to her sixth form. And she said, "Mom, have you heard about Everyone's Invited?" And I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Pull over. You got to see this." Now her social media was blowing up, was out of control because all of these kids connect, right? And what was going on with Everyone's Invited? Everyone's Invited was a website where young, particularly women, over 95% of people identify themselves as female, were posting on this social media site about being victims of sexual assault, rape, or sexual harassment. And again, sites like this existed. I was scrolling through it, and again, what made Everyone's Invited different? Again, on the heels of Sarah's murder, what made Everyone's Invited different was that schools were being called out, top independent schools, where the alleged perpetrator attended at the time, or where the incident allegedly occurred. And again, the press loved this. They jumped all over it because they could say, oh my God, those horrible kids at those horrible schools, which, well, come on, ridiculous, right? Like, think about it. This isn't an independent school problem or a state school problem. This is a societal problem. When these things keep occurring, when thousands of, yes, over 95% of people identify themselves as female, felt they had no other recourse, no other place to turn, but to post these horrific incidences on a social media site to virtual strangers. Now, my reaction was not all that surprised because of what I hear every day at schools. What did surprise me was societal reactions. The first thing was the not all men movement. Duh, we know that. Not all men. Of course, we know that. I received quite a few phone calls when Everyone's Invited was breaking and was in the press quite a bit. And the first phone call I received from a reporter, I was asked, how did I think the Everyone's Invited movement was affecting young men's mental health? Now, I'm rarely ever speechless, as you can imagine. But I literally looked at my phone and I'm thinking, is this the first thing you can ask me? I'm not saying it's not an issue to be dealt with, 100%. But shouldn't we be focusing on the victim outcrying of these horrific events and how it's affecting them and other victims, what it's triggering, despite gender orientation, right? And I was thinking about this a lot. I thought, you know what? I am a white, heterosexual, cisgender woman of privilege. I know that. I own it. I have very dear family members and friends who identify themselves as members of the LGBTQI community, including one of my daughters. Friends who are Black, who are Asian, who are brown, who are Jewish. And when they talk to me about being victims of homophobia or racism or anti-Semitism, my response is, well, not me, not all white women, because that would sound insensitive, it would sound ignorant and ridiculous. But I asked them to share their stories with me, their experiences, because I don't know what it's like to walk down the street holding my husband's hand in fear of being beaten up or ridiculed like my daughter does every day with her girlfriend. And I got to tell you, it terrifies me. I don't know what it's like to walk into an expensive shop and be followed by a security guard. When I walk into an expensive shop, I'm followed by shop assistants trying to sell me stuff. And I also don't know what it's like, as happened last summer with a very dear friend of mine. We were in the East End going for dinner. We turned a corner and there was a swastika painted on the side of a wall, spray painted. It wasn't large, but it was there. It was prominent. And I was horrified and I was angry and I was embarrassed. But my life didn't feel threatened like hers did because she's Jewish. So it's not about being defensive or gaslighting people's experiences, but unless we own it, we're not going to be able to move forward as a society. We're not going to be able to set role models for our young people so they can make things better. When we talk about rape culture, it is when gender-based sexual violence is trivialized and normalized, and in certain instances, even glamorized. And it's about taking control back. It's about seeing how we are being manipulated and how we can own the narrative. The facts are what they are. Over 95% 5% of people who are victims of these crimes identify themselves as female. 98.5% of perpetrators of these crimes identify themselves as male. Again, I'm not saying all men. The facts are the facts. I don't make them up. The successful prosecution rate, meaning a conviction or pleading guilty to a sex offense in England and Wales, the rate is 1.3%. Now, can you imagine if the conviction rate for murder or robbery or burglary or was assault was 1.3%? We would be up in arms. It'd be on the lead story of every newspaper, every news outlet. I found that statistic on page 11 of like the Evening Standard back in March, after the Department of Public Prosecutions had published it. That is outrageous. And why is that? And why don't young men come forward? Because we blame victims. In all my years as a prosecutor in New York in sex crimes special victims unit, my bureau was never able to go to trial on a case where a male was a victim and a male was a perpetrator, because they then shut down. They think, well, what does this say about me, my sexuality, my manhood or manliness, whatever that's supposed to mean? Because they feel blamed. If that man got his phone stolen or got his car jacked or his house burgled, he would never question his culpability in that crime. We would never, as a society, question a victim's culpability. But we do when it comes to sex crimes. And that is a problem. So one of the things we talk about with your children, and it's going to be on the handout, and this is an ongoing discussion. So today is an overview. And I know parents and carers that are watching this presentation are from various year groups. So every time we do speak to young people, we do it in an age-appropriate fashion. We don't freak the kids out. We do it with humor. And we want the conversations. And I know with Forrest, it's not just having us in for an hour, ticking a box, and then we leave. It is an ongoing discussion, and it has to be an ongoing discussion. Understanding what the law is empowering. I know that's why I went to law school. I wanted to know what the law is. I wanted to know what my rights were. That was really important to me. One of the things I want to point out, and I think it's really important that we demystify a lot of what young people think and people as society think when it comes to these crimes. One of the things I want to point out is sexual harassment. Because I think when we think about sexual harassment, we think of it as being physical. And that's partly because of Harvey Weinstein. And again, I'm a big proponent of the Me Too movement. But we think of this big burly man and we think of him having physical acts. In reality, sexual harassment is when an environment is created of a sexual nature that makes someone feel scared, intimidated, violated, or threatened. And I think it's something to, when you say something to someone that intimidates or scares or threatens them in a sexual manner, that's a crime. So whether it's the rape jokes or rating girls' bodies or telling someone what you want to do to them sexually and they have not asked for that information, that is education we need to give our young people, because it cannot be considered just banter. Words matter and words escalate. One of the really interesting things that after the post everyone's invited, we asked young people via surveys, what was consent? The number one answer that came back to us over and over and over again was 16. That was it. Not what it was, but what the age of consent was. Now, we know the age of consent is 16, but consent is so much more than that. It is an agreement. It is informed. It is based on knowledge. And this is so important. It is revocable at any time. Allowing someone to do something to you sexually or you to do something to them sexually with no fear, with no fraud, no force. In society, we have a vision of what these crimes are. And the crime that we envision, the cinematic view of this crime, is an ugly old man in a trench coat, in the rain, in an alleyway, in the dark, that pulls a woman, child, a man to the ground that they don't know. Now, does that ugly old man in the trench coat in the alleyway, the stranger, exist? Yes, we know that. Sarah Everhart, Sabina Nesser. And we want our young people to be careful. But 90% of victims know their assailant. They're people you know, they're people you trust. The problem is when something happens with someone you know, someone you trust. Someone maybe you've had a crush on, someone you've done something with them in the past sexually, or wanted something with them in the future sexually. You discount it, you rationalize it, because that person doesn't fit the vision. We treat the crime differently than we treat other crimes. We say, for example, rape, date rape, acquaintance rape, or sexual assault, date sexual assault, acquaintance sexual assault. And what do we mean by that? Well, sexual assault and rape on its own is when the victim and the assailant don't know one another. They're strangers. Date rape or date date sexual assault is when the victim and the assailant have some sort of romantic link. Now, it could be just have exchanged flirty texts, not have done anything, nothing physical, but we call it a date when there's a romantic link. Acquaintance rape or acquaintance sexual assault is when there is some sort of relationship, as tangential as it might be, between the victim and the assailant. It could be the person that works in the grocery store or your friend's cousin. But think about this. We don't do this with other crimes. We don't say, if you read in the paper, we don't read there was a date burglary, right? Or an acquaintance assault. We treat crimes for what they are. But when we put sex into the equation, we make it sound like what happened wasn't violent, controlling, or criminal, but sex that's just gone wrong. And I submit it is not. We treat victims differently. We look at what they're wearing, whether they've been drinking alcohol, what their sexual past is. We wouldn't do this if their phone was stolen, if their house was burgled, because those issues, quite frankly, are irrelevant. It's important for us to realize that to prosecute these cases, to arrest someone, there are so many hurdles that law enforcement has to go through. One of my best friends back in New York was the top homicide prosecutor for the state. She won the first murder one trial. Brilliant person. And we're having dinner one night and we're talking about what we do. And I said, I don't know how you prosecute murder. That's got to be so tough. And I said, Heidi, that's hard. She said, Deana, what you do is a lot harder than I do. And I said, how? She said, because when I walk into court, no one questions that I've got a dead body. No one questions that a crime took place. When you walk into a court, you've got to prove a crime even happened. And then the facts. There is so much confusion right now with our young people with consent. And so much of it goes to the negative imagery that they receive in society every day that we don't question, and we should. And we have to answer their questions. I don't believe in cancel culture at all. Bring it on. Let's have the discussions. If we cancel someone out, we're never going to educate anyone. We're never going to change opinions. Things are not going to get better. So when everyone's invited was happening, my youngest daughter, who's now at university, was getting messages from her male friends. Now, my youngest daughter, Lou, was at a single-sex girls' school up here in North London. Her male friends were at a lot of the schools that were being called out on Everyone's Invited. And they sent her some questions to ask me. She said, Mom, they're not being cheeky. They're not being disrespectful. They've seen you speak. They know what you do. They're really confused. Would you mind answering their questions? So she read out the top 3 questions. The first question I got asked was, if someone comes over to my house, right, don't they want to do something with me sexually? Like, I don't understand. Like, isn't that a signal? And I said, well, let's think about that. I go to my friend's house all the time. I have something to eat, a chat, Netflix and chill, but not in that way. It doesn't mean I want to do something sexual with them. Maybe they really like my company, I like their company, and we just want to be friends. Don't assume there's a sexual component. If someone starts it, shouldn't they be expected to finish it? Well, if I'm having a meal and I get full, I'm allowed to stop. I don't have to eat everything on my plate. if I start to run a 5K and I'm really tired or bored or it's raining and I want to stop at the 2K mark, I'm allowed. So are you. We're all allowed to have agency over our choices, sexual or not. When they say maybe later, are they being a tease? And every time I say this, the amount of nods I get in a room is just pretty phenomenal. This is very difficult for anyone to hear, but maybe the person that you like in a certain way doesn't feel the same way about you. They don't like you or want you in that way. And maybe by saying maybe later, they're not being a tease. They just don't want to hurt your feelings. And that's okay. Not everyone is going to feel the same way about us. Someone will, but just accept it, be friends, and move on. This question got asked to me directly, and it was not said this nicely. I was at a boarding school up north, and a young man asked me, and I'm going to say it the way I'm going to go in between how it says on the screen and what he said to me. Basically said, if a girl is dressed like a slut and she's stumbling out of a club drunk, in the middle of the night, isn't she asking for it? And I took a deep breath, again, not cancel culture. And I thought, we have to answer this question, right? As adults, we got to person up and answer this question. So I said, well, let me ask you a question to the gentleman. I said, you go to this expensive boarding school, and I assume that someone's paying for it and has money. And he said, yes. I said, can I assume your parents? He said, yes. I said, okay, so I'm going to make some further assumptions. I would imagine based on that, you live in a nice house. He said, yes. And your parents probably drive a nice car. He said, yes. And you have the latest iPhone, whatever it is, 15, whatever, it's 105 at this point. And he said, yes, I do. I said, well, you deserve to be burgled. Your house deserves to be burgled. Your car carjacked. And your phone deserves to be taken, stolen. So, no, it's different. I said, no, it's not. You possess things that society or a person deems to be attractive, desirable, enviable. Everyone can see it. I submit you're flaunting it. Therefore, you deserve it. Same thing. Your body is your property. No one has the right to touch it, comment on it, own it, or possess it because they or society deem it to be attractive, desirable, or enviable. A young woman at a school in year 10 said, no means no, not convince me. Wow, that was pretty intense. And that stuck with me. Because think about the negative gender stereotypes we see through a very heteronormative lens that we still see the world through, where you see so many times a young man, a young woman, they're kissing, they're hugging, they're going at it. And she's like, no, stop, the damsel in distress. And he keeps going, kissing or hugging her. And she's like, no, stop. And it looks quite sexy. It looks quite provocative, right? A young person might think, well, I want someone to want me that way. And does it say to young men that no really means yes? And does it say to young women, well, you really don't know what you want? It's these things that get into our subliminal perception of how we are supposed to act and be. But they're quite dangerous because that's a confusion. When someone says, no, it is over. And by the way, just because you've done something on Monday doesn't mean you got to do it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just because you started something doesn't mean you're obliged to finish it. And because you've done something in the past, you're not expected to do it again in the future. It is about owning your choices. Consent has to be given all the time. Not because it's given once, it means it carries on forever. But these things our young people struggle with. They're confused with good reason. So I want to look back at something that has always fascinated me. Look how far back we have been indoctrinated with these negative gender stereotypes. Take a look. Ms. Milton, can you play the first video?
What the Dude, seriously.
Yeah, dude. Seriously.
What? This? Nah, it's cool. I'm a prince. She's a princess. We were gonna, we messed around at the party, so we're just picking up where we left off.
But is she into it now?
She told me earlier she wants the D from the P.
From the P?
That's me, the prince, the P. I'm the P here, the prince. What? We should have made a contract or something?
No, but, did you ask her if she wants to?
Well, I guess not really.
What did that just show us? Imagine if that Disney video was something on today, modern day, okay? You go on Netflix, Amazon Prime, whatever it is, first episode of a new show, and it is a woman in a hospital bed in a coma, passed out, right? And a man that she knows, I don't know how she knows him, doesn't really matter, comes into the room, bends over, kisses her, feels her up, and breathes life into her. That would be off television in 24 hours. Hashtag no consent, hashtag me too. But we have seen these things our whole life and we don't question them. And that is why what I am finding every day going into schools, the division between young men and young women is greater than I've ever seen before. Young men feel confused and defensive, and I completely understand that. And young women are angry, and I understand that as well. We have a culture, and it's, guys, young men didn't create the world they're growing up in. We've created it. They're not growing up in the wild out there, okay? But we do encourage them to be aggressive, to be hyper competitive. There is a problem. Things like video games. In Grand Theft Auto, for example, there is a video game where the point of the game is to have sex with a prostitute and beat her up and get your money back. Kids get a dopamine hit from that. That is so misogynistic and so awful. And what is that thing? It is desensitizing the young people playing those games to gender-based sexual violence. And then you've got porn. And again, I'm not blaming anyone. Well, I'm blaming people who make the porn films, but the kids, they're victims of this. The average age a young person is being exposed to pornography, according to Ofcom, the government agency that monitors everything we do, is 11. Here's the thing. They're not looking at people making love. There's no kissing, there's no hugging, there's no caressing, there's no conversation going on, right? Porn back in the old days, so I'm told, like a firefighter would show up or a plumber, there'd be a bit of conversation, like a pretext of some sort of a plot. Now, nothing. It is hardcore, it is misogynistic, it's violent. If the average kid is watching it, particularly from young boys, and that's the majority of the young people watching it, if all they're seeing is violent, misogynistic, and that's what they think sex is supposed to be, well, when they are 16 years old or 17 or 18 or having a sexual relationship, if all they know is violent, hardcore images, they think that's how they're supposed to act. And then don't understand why they're confused. And honestly, if I had £1 for every mother of a son who told me their child was not watching porn, I'd have the biggest house in Kensington Gardens. But it's not the case. Please, Mrs. Milton, can you play the second video?
Hiya, I'm Sue. This is Derek. We're here because your son just looked us up online, to watch us.
Matt, darling, there's some people here to see you. So he watches you online?
Yeah, on his laptop.
iPad, PlayStation.
His phone, your phone.
Smart TV, projector.
Yeah, anyway, we usually perform for adults, but your son's just a kid. He might not know how relationships actually work. We don't even talk about consent, do we? No, we just get straight to it.
Yeah, and I'd never act like that in real life.
Nah. Hey, Maddie. You right?
Okay, Sandra, stay calm. You know what to do here. All right, Maddie. It sounds like it's time to have a talk about the difference between what you see online and real-life relationships. No judgment.
Many young Kiwis are using porn to learn about sex. Keep it real online. Get help and advice at keepitrealonline.govt.nz.
See the next video, the next slide.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
all working perfect.
All's okay?
All working perfectly.
Okay, excellent. So it's about having the conversation, as difficult as that is. And, looking at that video, is Maddie a bad boy? No, he's absolutely adorable. He's a baby. Is his mom a bad mom? Absolutely not. She's a lovely mom. But we have to recognize there's things out there that's out of our control. That was very different than when we were growing up. And we are out of our depth when it comes to this. And the reason is when our parents taught us stuff, right? They taught us based on their experience, whether it was to bake a cake, play football, whatever it was. But now we don't know what it's like to receive a sext at 12 years old or 13. We don't know what it's like to be exposed to hardcore pornography. It is so different. So we have to talk, size doesn't matter. If they're trying to live up to a porn star or a porn actor, they're going to fall very short. Penis sizes are 36% bigger. 80% of women have breast implants. All girls are hairless. We have a lot of hair up there and no hair down there. Not true. Porn is educational. I always say to the kids, are you going to learn to drive a car? You're not going to do it by watching the movie Fast and Furious 9. And if some of the guys laugh and say yes, I'm like, you ain't going to pass your driver's test. Not everyone likes it, by the way. It's not. I was at a school and a young man came up to me at year 13, talked to me afterwards, and he said, can I talk to you for a moment? And I said, yes. And he said, I have a very happy relationship with my girlfriend, but there are things that she wants to do sexually because she's watching porn that I don't want to do. And I said, okay, and I won't go into detail. And he said, I don't want to do those things. I don't want to be accused of anything. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you not want to be accused of anything, or do you not want sex to be that way for you? And he was quite a tall young man. I'm quite a short person. And I looked up at him, he looked down at me, and he got so bashful. And he said, I just don't want sex to be that way for me. Honestly, as a mother, my heart broke. And I just thought, how screwed up is this world that we've created? This young man doesn't feel he's empowered to own his body and own his choices. We need to make young men realize they have every right to say no as well. And we have to empower them that they could say no against pornography and own what they want in life. And I think that when we have a country, and same thing in the US, the leading killer of men under the age of 45 is suicide. We got a problem. We're not letting young men be vulnerable and feel. And those are the things we have to address. Also, pornography is addictive. So we could talk about healthy lovemaking, but at the end of the day, more young men are being treated for erectile dysfunction on the NHS because they cannot get it up with a three-dimensional person in a normal situation. They need one-dimensional hardcore images to perform. And this video shows it better than I can. Mrs. Milton, please, can you play the third video?
Sexual tastes vary from person to person, but with the current pornography epidemic, as some call it, one has to wonder how exactly this may affect our desires and perception of sexuality. Moreover, how does it affect our sex lives? Pornography constitutes about 25% of all search engine requests and is the fourth most common reason people give for going on the internet. And while it may seem to simply facilitate an instinctual sexual response linked to millions of years of evolution, the truth is, pornography has dynamically changed over time, ultimately molding our tastes and desires. The not-so-shocking truth is that pornography has profound consequences for the brain and acts in many ways like a drug. With prolonged exposure, your tolerance is increased, and many often find themselves addicted. Though it's not a physical substance, it leads to the same general loss of control, the compulsiveness to seek out the activity despite negative consequences, and withdrawal when it goes away, much like that of gambling or running, for example. The issue is that continued exposure can cause long-term or even lifelong neuroplastic change in the brain. Dopamine is released as a reward whenever we accomplish something, whether it be eating to sustain life or sexual activity to produce future life. And this dopamine consolidates neural connections in order to drive us to perform the same activity in the future. In other words, it alters and forms the brain cells to motivate certain actions. It rewires your brain. The National Institutes of Health measure drug addictiveness by testing rats. The rat is trained to press a button in order to get a drug, and the harder it works indicates how addictive the substance is. It turns out that the more addictive a drug is, the more dopamine we see released. And while there is, unfortunately, no rat porn that we can give to them, we do know that dopamine is also released during sexual excitement, which pornography plays right into. The more time you spend doing it, the more dopamine gets released, which reinforces the behavior and makes you not only desire it in the future, but require it. And as you begin to imagine these images away from the computer or while having sex, they become reinforced. Furthermore, each orgasm releases even more dopamine, which consolidates the connections made during the session. It's a feedback loop that becomes harder to escape. And just like a drug, your tolerance for visual stimulation has now compounded, making it more difficult to be turned on by reality. Pornography addiction can often lead to finding your mate less attractive. The good news is, it doesn't have to be permanent. Usually when people understand the mechanism and realize it's affecting their relationships, they can stop. The brain is often described as a use it or lose it system because the neural connections you stimulate grow stronger and desire to be activated, while the ones you ignore become weakened. Much like your muscles, which, if sitting still all day, itch for activity, but after prolonged non-use, they become complacent. Luckily, because of this use it or lose it brain, the same neuroplastic system that proliferates these habits can also be used to acquire healthier ones. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
Okay, so it's not only going on Pornhub, it's the pornification of pop culture, music lyrics, advertising. I'm just going to show you one ad to illustrate this. This is a Calvin Klein ad. If we really look at what's going on here, this woman is being sexually assaulted. She's being held down. She's being held down by her hair. We need to look at this stuff and analyze it. What is this saying to young men and women? Is it saying that to be attractive, you've got to be held down as a woman and passive and no agency over your choices, no mutual respect, no mutual consent? Is it telling young men that you've got to be violent? You've got to be this powerful person taking control over a woman's body? These are the things that we all need to question. And I'm telling you, they are in everyday's life. The porn conversation, to be honest, you can start the porn conversation with what I've just showed you. Listen to music lyrics. Ask your kid, what do you think when this gets said? Love Island. I mean, all those things are showing sexism, misogyny, casual sexual relationships. You know, that's what we need to talk about. If you sit down and let's talk about porn, it ain't going to happen. It's the other stuff. When you start talking about all the other stuff that they see every day, the porn conversation won't be as big of a deal. Also, sexting. You know, we don't know what it's like to receive a photo of a friend of ours in a sexual manner at 12, 13 years old. It didn't happen in our world. With our kids, it's normal. They need to understand that there is a legal age. They don't understand that. I don't get it. 16 years old to have a sexual relationship with someone, but I got to be 18 to have a sexual photo of them in my possession. Yes. It's where law and technology has not caught up with each other. The people that made the laws up were trying to keep young people from being exploited by older people. They didn't realize kids were going to do it to each other. So it's things like this, you know, it's about realizing you can't get those photos back. It's illegal. I always say take the granny test. And what do I mean? The next time before they Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok something, ask themselves, what would my grandmother see if she saw this? Now, granny would say, oh, what a beautiful grandchild I have. I'm going to show this to everyone at bingo on Thursday. Go ahead, post it. But if they would be mortified by what they're about to see or suffer a heart failure as a result, they should refrain from posting it. Some other tips, and this is for you as parents. You know, when it comes to parties, so many of the cases I work on and know of now is when there's alcohol at parties and parents are not there. We need to be present. Teach your child. They go together, they leave together, they have a plan, they have each other's backs. If they are really uncomfortable, have a text. They can text you a word that means they need to get home and they're not in a comfortable position. Always think where their friends are. They haven't seen Sophie or Ella or Raph. It's been 20, 25 minutes. Maybe they're having the time of their life, or maybe they're passed out somewhere. Wouldn't they want to know their friends were looking after them if they were in a vulnerable position? Alcohol and sexual assault, the correlation is extremely high. Again, I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to be the alcohol Nazi. I enjoy my wine in the evening, but alcohol radically changes behavior. And so many of these things happen at parties. We as parents need to be present. I don't care if they're 13. I don't care if they're 16. I don't care if they're 17. You cannot have these kids in control of your house. It's like Lord of the Flies. So on the handout, I believe these are all on. If not, I will send another handout with some tips for parents when it comes to hosting these parties. What else can you do? Well, teach our children not to be bystanders. You know, when someone's making the racist, homophobic, misogynistic comment or joke, speak out and say something. Someone doesn't grow up to be a bigot overnight. And I'm not saying that everyone that makes the rape joke is going to become a rapist, but I am saying I have seen in my career language escalate into action. When Everyone's Invited was breaking, I sent a couple of emails out to young men I knew very well, family, friends, who went to schools that were being called out and highlighted on Everyone's Invited. And I said to one of them at a co-ed school, did you see this stuff going on? Did you hear it? He said, you know, Deana, I wasn't the guy making the rape jokes, and I wasn't the guy rating girls' bodies, but I was there when it happened. And I realize now that my being complacent was actually complicit in that behavior. So it's about teaching our kids to have that responsibility. And also, if they see something, and again, I don't want to freak out the parents and carers of younger children for this presentation, but for the older sixth formers parents out there going on to university, this is a video. Mrs. Milton, if you could play video 4, it's quite triggering. The acting could be a lot better, but it's really important that we see it. Can you play this one, please?
Recognize if something is wrong. Don't be a bystander.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome.
How are you?
Hot in here.
Yeah, it is hot. We should go to the room, right? Do you want to go to the room? Yeah? Come on, let's go.
Hey, yo, bro, what are you doing? What the? Tonight is not the night. It's a no.
I said the acting could be better, but it's the point. It's about taking action. And if the worst case scenario ever does happen, not to blame the victim, encouraging them to speak to someone that they trust, contacting the police. They will not be forced to go forward, but there will be an investigation and there will be a record of what that person did. Putting my legal hat on, not to bathe or shower, not to wash the clothes they were wearing or their bodies or throw their clothes away, because their bodies and or their clothes can contain vital DNA evidence that we can use later for prosecution. Seek medical attention, seek psychological counseling. They might feel I'm okay, I'm strong, I'm fine, I can handle it. But that trauma can rear its ugly head and manifest itself in different ways down the road. Also, they always get a list of resources, and as you will get this list of resources in the handout, I know I've thrown a lot at you. We always say at the RAP Project that awareness is power. And the hope of our presentations is not only to make our young people more aware of these issues, but more empowered with their choices going forward. Thank you very much for listening. And I am thrilled to be able to have spoken to the parents and carers at Forest School. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mrs. Milton, for having us back in.
Thank you so much, Deana. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I'm on a double device at the moment, making sure our technical is all in order for this evening. But thank you so much, Deana. And like we said, it is a huge, huge topic. One that actually we will need to, as our head of RSHE, Miss Arthur, will be looking into and breaking down, as well as our phenomenal personal development curriculum as well, with Miss Adshead and Miss Spencer Ellis in sixth form, working with Miss Arthur. And as we said, these are ongoing conversations. These are large topics that I think at Forest we will be brave and authentic in saying that we don't have all the answers, and that we'll need to take day by day, conversation by conversation. But I hope the parents and carers feel reassured through the pastoral system, through our ongoing development of our RSHE and personal development curriculum, that we put this at the forefront. And as the warden spoke to us at the start of the year, to all colleagues, that RSHE, online education, just to touch the tip of the iceberg, is two of our huge whole school priorities. And as the parents carers know, and I think you know, Deana, at Forest, there is no hierarchy with academics and pastoral and safeguarding. It's important that we develop the whole child at Forest. So thank you once again. Parents and carers, please do fill out our feedback survey. And one of the most important questions is do you want to follow up Q&A with Deana? We can provide that. We will break down these topics later on throughout the academic year and beyond. As I said, it's ongoing conversations, and we just opened the umbrella, didn't we, this evening, Deana? And we just started that conversation. You know, we've only just started. So please do continue to feed back to us. We will have those ongoing conversations, and I wish you all, Forest community members, a very, very restful and enjoyable evening ahead. Thank you once again, Deana.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Milton. Lovely to see you again. Cheers. Good night.